Okay. Last week, we've been still, I keep saying this is going to be the end of it, but it kind of is. We've kind of drifted into something else about religious deconstruction and what may cause people to get to where they abandon their faith. And we used some examples from Habakkuk chapter 1 last week about crying out to God when we have problems, when we see things going on, and it just doesn't seem like God is doing anything. But Habakkuk just kept praying, and he kept praying, and he kept praying. But it just seemed like God wasn't doing anything. Matter of fact, in verses 2 and 3, he said, "O Lord, how long shall I cry, and you will not hear? Even cry out to you violence, and you will not save. Why do you show me iniquity and cause me to see trouble? For plundering and violence are before me. There is strife and contention arises." So he was just wondering and crying out to God. And I think that happens to us a lot of times. And it can be detrimental to our faith when we think we know that we're going to God with a problem or a trial or suffering or some injustice that we're seeing in the world. And it just doesn't seem like God is doing anything. Well, here's what we're going to find now is God doing anything? And he's going to give Habakkuk an answer, but it's not a good one. And I think here's another problem that arises is we may cry out to God and it may seem like he's not doing anything because he's not doing what we expect him to do, and he does something totally different. And it kind of catches us off guard and we don't understand it, and that can be detrimental to our faith. So remember, we talked about if we're abandoning our faith because of some issue that's going on, it has to do with what our understanding is. We need to dive deeper in that subject. Don't throw out all of our faith because of one issue we may be having. We need to work through that issue. We need to study. We need to continue to pray to God. We need to work through these things, not abandon it. But we need to rest assured that God does know what's going on. In Psalms 33, beginning at verse 13, "The Lord looks from heaven. He sees all the sons of men. From the place of his dwelling, he looks on all the inhabitants of the earth. He fashions their heart individually. He considers all their works." And in Hebrews chapter 13, beginning at verse 5, "Let your conduct be without covetousness. Be content with such things as you have, for he himself has said, I will never leave you nor forsake you. So we may boldly say, the Lord is my helper. I will not fear. What can man do to me?" He says he'll never leave nor forsake me. We either believe that or we don't. We either believe that he knows what's going on or we don't. And here's what we've got to realize. You think about what God has done. What has God done for us? What has he done to provide salvation and that path for us? What's he done? Everything we need. I mean, the Bible tells us, 2 Timothy 3, 16 and 17, what all Scripture is given by inspiration of God is profitable for doctrine, for reproof, for instruction in righteousness, that the man of God may be complete, thoroughly equipped to every good work. He gives us everything we need, doesn't he? Through his word. I was actually talking to someone just this week, and we were discussing this very fact of either God has given us everything or he's not. We were having a discussion about God talking to us. There was a statement made several times, well, God talks to me, God talks to me. And I just finally asked, well, what does he say? Does he say something different than in his word? Is he going to say something different to you than he is to me? Is he going to say, what has he given us? He's given that perfect law of liberty. He's given us everything that we need, that we can have instructions to get to heaven, and he's provided his son. He has sacrificed his son so we can have that opportunity. So God has invested in us, has he not? Do you think he's just going to just let us, just create us and then say, okay, you're on your own now? Well, of course, the Bible teaches us over and over and over again that God knows what's going on. He'll never leave nor forsake me. He knows the ways that we have. But here's the thing. Where our faith can stumble and sometimes fall is when God does something that we don't expect him to do because we thought he should have done something else. So you take Habakkuk here instance. He's telling God, I'm seeing this injustice. I'm seeing wickedness. I'm seeing all this. I'm not looking out in the world seeing it. I'm seeing it within my own people. And God just doesn't seem like you're going to do anything about it. But notice here, starting in verse 5. He says, here, notice how God answers. Look among the nations and watch. Be utterly astounded. For I will work a work in your days which you will not believe, though it were told to you. For indeed I am raising up the Chaldeans, a bitter and hasty nation which marches through the breadth of the earth to possess dwelling places that are not theirs. They are terrible and dreadful. Their judgment and their dignity proceeds from themselves. Their horses also are swifter than leopards, and more fierce than even evening wolves. Their chargers charge ahead. Their cavalry comes from afar. They fly as the eagle that hastens to eat. They all come for violence. Their face are set like the east wind. They gather captives like sand. They scoff at kings, and princes are scorned by them. They deride every stronghold, for they heap up earthly mounds and seize it. Then his mind changes, and he transgresses. He commits offenses, ascribing this power to his God. Now notice here, in verse 5, he says, look among the nations and watch. Here's his answers to Habakkuk. Remember, Habakkuk's crying out to him, you're not doing anything. I'm crying out to you. This is happening. You're not doing anything. And notice what God tells him first and foremost. Look among the nations and watch. Be utterly astounded. For I will work a work in your days which you would not believe, though it were told to you. You know what he's telling him? I am working. I am doing something. And even if I told you what I'm doing, and I'm going to tell you, you're not even going to believe it. It's going to be so far beyond your belief that I've actually got this in motion that you're going to be astounded by it. And he tells him he's going to raise up the Chaldeans. Something's not even on their radar. You know, these are individuals that's down on the southern part of the Babylonians, and they can, be interchangeable. You can remember things that took place with the Chaldeans of how ruthless they were. And God said, I'm going to use them to bring judgment. He's going to use a wicked nation to do his will. Do you think Habakkuk expected that? Do you think that's the answer that he wanted? Do you think that was in his realm of possibility? See, I think this is what happens. When we cry out to God, we expect him to do things a certain way. And then when he does something so far beyond what our belief is, that we can't comprehend why he's doing it that way. And that's exactly what we're seeing here. God's answer begins by telling him that he's going to do something that he won't believe even if he were told about it. He said, you're not going to believe what I'm doing even if I explain it to you. How many times do we think that God answers our prayers in a completely different way than we thought that he would? You ever seen God do that? You ever been praying and praying and praying and praying for something, but something totally different happens, even unexpectedly, or even what we perceive to be worse than we thought what was actually happening? That can hurt our faith, couldn't it? When that happens, our faith can be to be where we're looking at it and saying, well, first I thought you wasn't listening. Now I don't understand at all what you're doing. You're making it worse. God, you're making it worse. This is far beyond what I'm thinking about, that it seems worse to me. You ever been in that position? That's got to be a pretty hard position to be in. It's almost like I can't help but think of Job here when he lost everything, when he says in chapter 10 of Job, when he says, I go forward, I don't see you. I go backward, you're not there. I go to the left and right. I can't perceive you in this. This is horrible. I'm serving you. I'm a righteous person serving you. He's not bragging. He's just saying, I didn't do anything wrong, and all this is happening to me. I don't see you in this, God. But then he said, I will trust you like my necessary food. Because he said, God knows where I'm at. See, we have to keep telling ourselves that. Even if we don't understand what God is doing and why He's doing it the way that He's doing it. And we may not even realize He's doing it because it's so far from our line of thinking that it appears to us that He's not even doing anything, so things are getting worse. And I think that's what happens sometimes. If you look in Isaiah chapter 29, he says, "Therefore, behold, I will again do a marvelous work among this people, a marvelous work and a wonder. For the wisdom of their wise men shall perish, and the understanding of their prudent men shall be hidden." See what Isaiah is saying? God's going to do something that's so far beyond that the wise and the prudent people are not going to know how to take this. Because here's the thing, what looks wise in our eyes may not be wise to God. And what looks foolishness to us, we're going to get into that. You know where I'm going with that. What looks foolishness to the world is wisdom with God. But see, a lot of times we don't look at it that way. In Isaiah 28, verse 21, "For the Lord will rise up as at Mount Perazim. He will be angry as in the valley of Gibeon, that He may do His work, His awesome work, and bring to pass His act, His unusual act." See, God's ways aren't our ways. So if we want our faith to be strong and remain strong and even grow, we've got to make sure that we're not expecting something from God when we don't have the whole picture and we think He should be doing something in a certain way and He's doing something totally different, and we don't know how to take that sometimes. And sometimes we can abandon our faith because of it. So Isaiah prophesies here about how God was going to act in a way so that the wise would be completely astounded. They won't know how to take it. Now, if we go to the New Testament, we see this, and we alluded to this a little bit last week. Remember, this was part of the problem in John chapter 11 when Martha and Mary both, in John chapter, remember what they said in John chapter 11? Now, Martha said to Jesus, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." Now, Mary said the same thing on down. She said, "Then when Mary came where Jesus was and saw Him, she fell down at His feet, saying to Him, 'Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died.'" And we use this part as the same thing as Habakkuk. They kept telling Jesus, "We called to you. We sent word to you that Lazarus was sick, but you didn't come. You didn't do anything." Was Jesus doing anything? Did He just say, "Nope, I'm not going to do that"? He was doing something, wasn't He? So if we think about this about Lazarus, what actually happened? As we go through, when He got there, He already had something in their mind. In their mind, He should have healed Lazarus from his sickness. What Jesus knew He was going to do is raise him from the dead. So when He gets there and He tells them to roll over the stone, you remember what they said to Him? "But he's been dead 4 days." You know what they're telling Him? "You don't want to move that stone. He's going to stink. He's already dead. What are you doing here? You didn't get here when he was sick." And He starts telling him what He's going to do. And think about them hearing that. So first they thought He wouldn't do anything. Now what are they thinking? What is He going to do? Did they ever expect Him to raise him from the dead? Is that what they thought He was going to do? Yeah, I don't think they expected it. So He's doing something far beyond what their belief was. He's seeing the whole picture of what He's going to do, but that's not what they expected from Him. They expected Him to come when he was sick, and they knew He could heal him from that. But Jesus needed to know He could go far beyond that. You see what I'm saying here? I think we find ourselves in that position sometimes to where, "God, if you'll just do this, I just need you to do this. This is what I'm dealing with right now. This is what's in front of me now. This is what I'm going through now. This is what I need you to do now." but he doesn't do something now like we think he should, even though he is working. And then he does something totally different than we thought he was going to do. And it catches us off guard. And it can do a couple of things. It can either be detrimental to our faith because we're still focusing on what we thought he should do, or it could build our faith to realize I need to quit focusing on what I think he should do and focus on what I know he can do. And leave it up to him and trust in him. See, he's telling Habakkuk something here that's pretty devastating. I'm going to raise up this nation to come in and bring judgment on this nation. That's not what he wanted to hear. That's not the solution to his problem. That's not what he was expecting. But that's exactly what we see. If you look in Romans, notice what Paul proclaims here. Starting in verse 33 of chapter 11. Oh, the depth of the riches, both of the wisdom and knowledge of God, how unsearchable are his judgments, and his ways past finding out. For who has known the mind of God, or who has become his counselor? So, have you ever tried to become God's counselor? God, here's what you need to do. Here's what you should do. Here's what I expect you to do. Here's what everybody else expects you to do. So do this. And we focus on that one little point. I had a lesson, I think I've used it several times in gospel meetings, on about what God is able to do. Don't focus on what we want him to do. Focus on what he's able to do. Then that's going to help our faith. Because as long as I know he's able to do it, is there anything else really I need to know? Do I need to know every aspect of how he does it? And we're like this in our life, aren't we? You know, you ever ask for help from somebody? How do we usually ask for help from somebody? Rellin sent me a meme, had this on a shirt, and I said, that's exactly how I am. And it read on here, hey, I need some help. Never mind, I'll just do it myself. And I thought about that. I thought, I think that's how I am. Hey, I need some help, and then I'll watch them do it for a few minutes. I'm like, no, I'll just do it myself. Just let me do it. Whether it's wrong or not, it's my way, right? I think that's how we approach God, isn't it? We approach God, God, I need your help. Never mind, I'll do it this way, or as long as you do it the way that I want you to do it, that's how I need help. I mean, you think about all the things that God has done throughout Scripture. Has it ever really been like mankind thought it should be, or how it will be? I mean, we could go over a lot of things about this. But let's move on to verse 6 and 11. Notice how he describes this nation. For indeed I am raising up the Chaldeans, a bitter and hasty nation, which marches through the breadth of the earth to possess dwelling places that are not theirs. They are terrible and dreadful. Now, can you imagine God describing someone like this? They're awful. This is an awful people. And this is who I'm raising up. This is who's going to do my work. Can God use unrighteous people to do his work? Can God use wicked people to do his work? Would we expect him to do that? We wouldn't think that that's how it's done. But think about that. He's describing these people to possess dwelling places that are not theirs. They are terrible and dreadful. Their judgment and their dignity proceed from themselves. They look to themselves. They don't look to God. They don't have anything to do with God. This nation that I'm raising up to do my will, they don't even look to me for anything. They look to themselves for this, he says. He says their horses also are swifter than leopards, more fierce than evening wolves. Their chargers charge ahead. Their cavalry comes from afar. They fly as the eagles that hasten to eat. They all come for violence. Their faces are set like the east wing. They gather captives like sand. They scoff at kings, and princes are scorned by them. They deride every stronghold, for they heap up earthly mounds, and they seize it. He's telling Habakkuk, this is who's coming. Can you imagine being Habakkuk, hearing that and having to say that to the people, that had to be a pretty hard task, wouldn't it? That had to be pretty hard to even digest. I don't know that the Bible alludes to even the prophets didn't understand everything that they prophesied. So I don't know that they were even on their radar. And I can imagine him thinking, those people? That's who's coming? That's your solution? Is to bring wicked people and use their... I can see him weighing it out. Okay, I said that the people around me are wicked, but they're not that wicked. So you've got less wicked and more wicked, and you're using the more wicked to bring on the less wicked. I can see him just playing this out in his mind of thinking, that's your solution? That's what you're going to do? And it's got to be interesting. We see the same things, I think, today when we think about it. God's saying that He's going to raise up and empower a wicked nation to accomplish His purpose. And does God have a right to do that? Does He need our permission to do? What's that? Yeah, He's a sovereign God. And I think in our faith, sometimes that's one of the hardest things to accept, is that He's a sovereign God.
He used those wicked nations to teach His people a lesson.
Yeah.
He brought them to their knees, and then they would repent.
Yeah.
That's the reason He did it.
Yeah. He already had the plan in place when Habakkuk was crying out, you're not doing anything. God's already got the plan to do it. He's bringing judgment on them. Yeah, you're right. They're wicked, and here's the consequence of that. Here's what's going to happen with that. We think sometimes that, well, the answer should be God ought to just heal our nation, and He ought to make us how do you think He's going to have us to do better? I mean, what do we really think that's going to take place? What did these people here think really needed to happen for them to get back on the right path? And I think, and we're going to talk about that in a minute, I think we could ask ourselves the same thing. But look in Genesis chapter 50, verse 20. Remember what Joseph said? But as for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good in order to bring it about as it is this day to save many people alive. Did God use evil to save a nation? Did what Joseph's brothers do to him, was that evil? Was that bad? Was that wicked? Well, absolutely it was. And Joseph suffered because of it, but he's still able to say, you meant it for my bad. You did something wicked, but God used that to save. He used you doing that to save a nation. And that's not the first and only time or the last time God does that. But see, did the brothers know that they were doing God's will? That God was going to use that for good? Did Joseph know it the whole time when he was in the pit, when he was sold into slavery, when he was at Potiphar's house, when he was in prison? Do you think he sat and thought, it's okay, God already has a plan for me? I think he knew God had a plan, but he had to be thinking through that. Why does this keep happening to me? When we think of a sovereign God and think of we may have to suffer for the greater benefit of the good, we don't like to think that. Or when we think how God can bring judgment on us, we don't like to think of it that way. Maybe God, these people, maybe Habakkuk needs to thinking in his mind, I know I've been crying out to you about this, but maybe if you just gave them a time out, instead of bringing this nation to bring, as Roger said, bring them to their knees, maybe that might be a little too harsh. But God knows exactly what He's doing. But again, think of it in today's terms. When we're crying out to God, when we see things going on, one, do we really know that God's doing something? And two, when He does, do we see it and do we accept it? And do we understand it? I think there's a lot of times we don't, because we don't want to accept it, because we don't realize that it's actually God working, and He may be working through evil individuals. You know, God is, in short, is telling them, I know what's going on. I know what's happening. And here's my plan. And me telling you my plan, you're still not going to understand it. It's going to astound you. It's going to be wonder. Think about it in our terms. I think this is hard for us to appreciate, I think, sometimes the answer that God gives him. Imagine us looking at our country. What do we see when we look at our country today? What would you say? How would you describe our country today? Wonderful? Evil? Maybe even wicked? What if we're crying out to God and crying out to God and crying out to God? God, how long? Have you ever done that? Have you been praying? You ever been watching the news and just think, how long, God? How long can this go on? Then God says, here's how I'm going to do it. Here's how I'm going to take care of this wickedness. I'm going to rise up a nation to come and put you to your knees. What would that look like to us? Would that look like God's helping or hurting? Just say, I'm going to raise up China, and China's going to come and put you to your knees. I mean, think about that. I'm going to raise up another country, another nation that's going to come and take this superpower nation that we've got it so good, and I'm going to bring it to its knees. Isn't that essentially what he's telling Habakkuk? This nation that may not even be on your radar, they're coming, and here's the kind of people they are. See, we think sometimes when election time or something comes up in our nation and we think it doesn't go exactly our way, we're trying to figure out, God's plan in all of this. Can we really know? It may look awful bad, but it may be God's judgment that He's bringing. We may be praying, okay, I want to get the right people in there that's in leadership, and they're going to just wipe the books clean, and we're going to go back to a righteous nation. Well, that may be God's plan. But God's plan may be raising somebody up to bring this nation to its knees because of the wickedness. I mean, that sounds doom and gloom, doesn't it? But that's exactly what he's telling Habakkuk here. God, I see this wickedness around me. You need to do something. God said, I am doing it. Here's my plan. Here's what I've got in the works coming your way. Okay, maybe you shouldn't have told me that, God. And here's my point I'm trying to make. I'm trying to get us to see that God wants us to pray to Him. But when we're praying to Him, don't think for a minute God doesn't know what's going on. And don't think for a minute He doesn't have a plan. So while we're praying and we're telling God and expressing God our wants, our needs, our struggles, and that's what He wants us to do, understand He's not forgotten us.
Would this also be related to say like with the story of the Tower of Babel, where they built the tower and, changed the language, people couldn't understand each other?
You mean as far as God having a plan and it may not go on like we think? Well, yeah. If you look at all the things God has done, and you look at how His plan has been, to us, it looks like more of a problem. But to God, it's the solution. And if you think of all the things that happened, take for example, okay, children of Israel had a problem in Egypt, right? They cried out to God for what? What did they cry out to God for? Deliverance, right? God delivered them, but what did He deliver them into? Straight to the banks of the Red Sea, in between that and the Egyptian army. Did they ever, in their wildest dreams, when they cried out to God, think He's going to deliver them and put them in a spot where to them it looked like a worse of a problem? Did they ever expect that river to open up, them to cross over, and the Egyptian army to die in the water? You think that ever crossed their mind when they left Egypt? I don't think so. I think they cried out to God. God, when are you going to, 400 years they cried out to Him. When are you going to do something? When are you going to do something? Here's where we're at. And He does something, but takes them in the middle of something where it almost looks worse, or it does look worse to them. But God delivers them, doesn't He? Jesus let Lazarus die. Again, that didn't look like the solution that they were wanting. But He let them die so He could do something greater that they never expected Him to do. That kind of reminds you of Ephesians 3:20, doesn't it? God is able to do for us far abundantly more than we can ask or think, according to the power that's in us. So He did that with the children of Israel in Egypt. He did that by letting Lazarus die. That was God's solution. Now, think about it. God's solution, you can go back to the wicked too. God's solution for mankind was to let His Son die, didn't He? You remember how He accomplished that? Through the deceitfulness of Judas. Well, it was a lot more than that, but His own disciple, his wickedness of turning him over, God used the wickedness of people to accomplish His good. But you think about it on the other side, that looks foolishness. Paul even said it was foolishness to the world, right? To those that are perishing, that's foolishness. That looks like a defeat. You know, remember the two on the road to Emmaus when they were walking there? They said, we thought He was the one. You know, they're talking to Jesus and saying, here's what transpired. Have you been under a rock and don't know what's going on? Here's what's transpired. And we thought He was the one. But yet He was crucified. Again, He's still doing something unbelievable. So you have these events that's taking place, and we look at it and we think, one, God's not listening, but two, He does something we don't expect Him to do. We think it needs to be this way, but you got to look, God is accomplishing a lot more than what we just think He's accomplishing. You know, He's accomplishing one. You go back to Egypt, He's bringing judgments upon Egypt, but He's also teaching that nation of His to trust Him. So He's got a couple things going on here that the people don't realize or even want to think about. All they think about is what they're seeing in front of them. But we think it's something different than what God is accomplishing. I think this is a critical thing for us today. The Apostle Paul quotes Habakkuk in a section in which he talks about it in Acts chapter 13. Now, it's a little lengthy, but I want us to look at this. He said, men and brethren, sons of the family of Abraham, and those among you who fear God, to you the word of this salvation has been said. For those who dwell in Jerusalem and their rulers, because they did not know Him, nor even the voices of the prophets which are read every Sabbath, have fulfilled them in condemning Him. And though they found no cause of death in Him, they asked Pilate that He should be put to death. Now when they had fulfilled all that was written concerning Him, they took Him down from the tree and laid Him in a tomb. But God raised Him from the dead. He was seen for many days by those who came up with Him from Galilee to Jerusalem, who are His witnesses to the people. And we declare to you glad tidings, that promise which was made to the fathers. God has fulfilled this for us, their children, in that He has raised up Jesus, as it is also written in the second Psalm, you are my son, today I have begotten you, and that He raised Him from the dead, no more to return to corruption. He has spoken thus, I will give you the sure mercies of David. Therefore He also says in another psalm, you will not allow your Holy One to see corruption. For David, after he had served his own generation by the will of God, fell asleep, was buried with his fathers, and saw corruption. But He whom He raised, God raised up, saw no corruption. Therefore let it be known to you, brethren, that through this man is preached to you the forgiveness of sins. By Him everyone who believes is justified from all things from which you could not be justified by the law of Moses. Now watch him here starting in verse 40. Beware therefore, lest what has been spoken in the prophets come upon you. Behold, you despisers, marvel and perish, for I work a work in your days, a work which you will by no means believe, though one were to declare it to you. So as Paul goes through basically God's plan of redemption and what took place with Christ, he said, this is in front of your eyes. He says, you're seeing this, but don't fall into that trap to where you're not going to believe it, even though it was told to you. This is astounding. This is something great. This is something big. That's the whole purpose of what the miracles were, to confirm what he was saying was true, that he was the Son of God, because this was something different to them. Though they should have known it through the Scriptures, but this was something different. And Paul said, don't fall into the same crack here, that you don't believe. Because this is what God is doing, even though it doesn't seem like it's a very smart thing to do. You know, our plan of salvation is hinged on the fact of God giving His Son to be crucified on a cross. But see, that's not where it starts. That's not the unbelievable part of our salvation. Because they were crucifying people all the time. It's that resurrection that's the difference. That's the unbelievable part. That's the part you got to pay attention to. That's the part you got to believe, that they weren't going to believe it until they actually saw it. And Paul said, even though you're seeing it, don't fall in that same crack of not believing it. So we can get into this situation again to where when we start doubting, we start questioning our faith because we don't think God is working or we don't understand the way in which He is working. Think about all these instances in Scripture to where there was others that were scratching their head and saying, you're going to do it this way? Can you imagine the walls of Jericho? They're going to come down by doing what? Walking around it and blowing a trumpet? Are you serious? But that's what He did, wasn't it? That's how He accomplished it. You're going to spread your word by these 12 that you picked out? A tax collector? An old cussing fisherman? A zealot? And one that has persecuted the church? That's who you're using? I mean, think about how God works. It's hard to even fathom, but I think that's the point. God's not asking us to know every reason and why He does what He does. He wants us to trust Him. That's what He told Job. That's what He tells us in Ephesians 3:20, that I can do far above what you can ask or think of me. I still want you to ask. I still want you to keep asking. I still want you to keep having faith and keep trusting. But don't focus on what you think I'm going to do, because sometimes it might disappoint you because you don't understand it. But it's going to astound you beyond your belief. So again, when we look at reasons why people leave their faith, I think these are just a few. One, we don't think God does anything sometimes, or is doing anything. Or two, we don't understand what He's doing. But I asked you, do we have to? Did Job understand the conversation between God and Satan? Hey, Satan, have you considered my servant Job? Like I say many times, I like to be the one in the class with my head down. I don't want teacher to call on me. I sure don't want God to call on me and say, hey, Satan, He's ready for you. Am I? That's what Job was saying. Am I really? Am I really ready for this? But God knew he was, even if Job didn't. Job didn't understand it. And then when God explained things to him about all these wonderful works he does, Job was like, no. This is too wonderful for me to understand. God said, exactly. Too wonderful for you to understand. I'm the creator, you're the creation. I've got this. Don't worry about it. Any final thoughts or comments?
Sometimes we worry that we're on a path from God, that we're on a path to suffer and die. What's going to happen? I'm going to suffer and die. A lot of it was that, well, we really need to get our mind wrapped around, we might have to suffer and live. Job's an example Daniel's example of that. He went through about 3 different hostile takeovers where everybody got let go but him, and
Yeah.
everybody else died, and he's still sitting here kind
Yeah.
of in the spot. For most of us, I think we worry about that potential end, and that could be it, but we should really be focused on if I'm called to suffer and it ends up that here I am, I'm going to be right in the middle of it, and I might be there being thrown into a lion's den with white hair on my head. Is my faith ready to do that?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, to have faith may mean we go in the furnace. It may mean we go in the lion's den. It may be that we feel like we're blocked in and have nowhere to go. It may be, all these things can build up, and it can really hurt our faith if we're not careful. But God is saying, I've got a path for you. But what he's mostly saying is, this world is not all that there is. I'm preparing you for that eternity. And that's what we need to keep focused on, not just the things that's happening to us here. Even though some of the things that happen to us here, they hurt. It's a real pain, emotionally and physically, the things that we have to go through. But just know that we still have that Heavenly Father that knows what we're going through. And He sees it. He sees it.